Welcome everybody, this is Julian Bucknall from DevExpress. Welcome to this webinar on Julian on JavaScript, reading jQuery 1.6.1, and it's part 2 of a two-part series. In fact, the first part was on version 1.5.2, but since then they've released a new major version, so that's the one we'll use today. I'm afraid Amanda is not here to introduce me, so I'm going to have to introduce myself. I'm the CTO of DevExpress, and without any further ado, let's start the show. So I have a little bit of an agenda this time, not a very big one. We should be able to cover these quite easily within our 45 minutes. Remember, if you do have any questions about what I'm presenting, do please put them in the questions area of your GoToMeeting box, and we'll get to them at the end. I won't be able to look at the questions as I'm doing the presentation, so I'm afraid you can't interrupt me. So there we go. And the other thing to note is this is not a webinar about how to use jQuery. In fact, that's going to be my next webinar in a couple of weeks' time, on the 6th of June, I believe. So don't ask any questions about the basic use of jQuery, because, as I say, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be answering all that kind of question at that particular time. So my agenda today is how to write JavaScript with a team, what jQuery can show us about that, and the next one is a kind of bizarre looking title, what jQuery of some selector actually returns. What are the fundamental objects within jQuery that you're going to be messing around with? So teamwork. Let's imagine that you're writing some kind of JavaScript library, and you have several developers on the team, so 3, 4, 5, whatever it happens to be. So we'll look here about jQuery, how it splits codes into files, about what it does about unit testing, and about how it actually builds the final JS file that you and I download. So let's just skip out of that for a moment, drag that out of the way. Yeah. So jQuery is actually hosted on Git or JIT, depending on how you pronounce it. In essence, if you go to the jQuery page site, if you click on the download link up here, you can download jQuery itself, either the minified version or the development version, which is the unminified full source code, full comments and all the rest of it. But best to go to this page here, the download page, and if you click on the Git, jQuery Git link there, you'll find a link to the jQuery Git repository. So here we are, jQuery, the project contains these files and these folders. The one I want to look at for the moment is the make file here. jQuery is built, hang on a minute, I've just got to change something on my other screen. There we go. jQuery is built using a make facility, either make itself or Ant. You need that if you really wanted to build jQuery. All we're going to do here is just look at the code in the make file. And the bit I want to point out to you right at this very moment is this particular section here, where we're defining the various individual modules of jQuery. So we start off with core, there's deferred support, all the way down to dimensions. And then underneath that, we tack on a couple of little source files. There's an intro and an outro to this thing. And what actually happens is, just a bit down here. Here we are. We do a call to cat, which is a Unix command to concatenate text files, and we pass in the modules item here, which basically consists of all the modules files. So let's have a quick look at the source folder in Git, and here it is. It's here's the intro bit of JavaScript. Let's open that up just to see what it's actually in there. So the intro basically just contains a comment saying, hey, this is jQuery. There's a couple of tags here which will get replaced with the actual version number and in fact the date. And all it contains is these couple of lines of code. One is the introductory bit where we have an anonymous auto-executing function. I discussed this last time, and that's where it's declared, and we declare these 2-3 little local variables inside this function. If I nip over to Visual Studio now, you can see what it looks like once it's gone through the entire build process. So the version number has been replaced, the date has been replaced, and here is, in fact, that first intro.js. The rest of it is concatenated by the build process. And if we switch back over there and have a look at the outro.js, it's just the last couple of lines of the jQuery JavaScript file. And if we go down to the bottom, here we are. There they are, the last 2 lines there. And then in between those, there's every single one of the other jQuery modules. So let's have a quick look at one of them. Jump back. If I look at the, first of all, there's the core set of JavaScript, core set of jQuery functionality, and then there is this thing called deferred.js, support.js, and data. Let's have a quick look at deferred.js just for what it actually looks like itself. It basically consists of, this seems a little weird, a anonymous auto-executing function again. If we go down to the bottom of the module, there it is. It gets called. However, let me, so we're back at the top again. Let me just search for promise methods in my full JavaScript, full jQuery file here. So now the weird thing is, that first line, function jQuery, has disappeared. It's no longer there. And the last line, you take my word for it rather than me search for it, has also disappeared. The build process essentially strips the first line and the last line out of these files. All of these files, apart from core.js, all have this preamble, and they all have the bit at the end which actually calls the auto-executing anonymous function. If I nip back over to the make file, essentially that's part of the concatenation process. We're going to be stripping out that declaration of the anonymous function, replace it with blank essentially, and strip out the call to it at the end of all of these files. So what does that give us? I mean, what's the point of having this in the first place? Well, it does mean that the individual team members on the jQuery team can actually work on these individual modules separately from the main jQuery. They can essentially have a script tag to load the real jQuery, and then a script tag to load each one of these, well, the one they're actually working on, of these JavaScript files. And what will happen is, because of the way the code is structured, all of these internal methods, public methods for jQuery will replace the ones in the, quote, real jQuery. So in essence, if somebody on the team is working on defer.js, he can work on defer.js without actually worrying about anything else inside jQuery. He can make changes and do some testing and whatever it happens to be. And all of these separate JS files work in the same way. So let's just select effects.js, and here it is, that preamble there and the sign off at the bottom. Both will be stripped out when jQuery.js is created. The interesting, so that's an interesting way of working with lots of different modules and using the build system to remove all of those statements that you require for testing and for separate development. So that's an interesting thing to bear in mind. And another one is, if we have a look at the makefile again, there is this file called selector.js, and yet if we look in here, there is no selector.js. This caught me by surprise to begin with, but what is actually happening here is selector.js, we're in the makefile again, is created from an open source library called Sizzle. Does a couple of little changes and that becomes selector.js. So it's actually just part of the build process that creates this file out of an open source project called sizzle.js. What Sizzle does is it's a highly optimized library for getting elements out of the DOM. So, getting all elements with a particular class name, getting the single element with a particular ID, getting all of the HTML elements for, say, divs or paragraphs or whatever it happens to be. Sizzle.js is optimized across all browsers to do that. That's kind of an interesting thing, that open source jQuery actually relies on an open source project itself. The other thing that is kind of interesting about the makefile is it actually calls or it has a lint process within the makefile. In essence, what this is, just like in C++, there's a lint program that you can use, which basically validates your code for certain common problems. And jQuery itself actually runs itself against jslint, which is a library written by Douglas Crockford of Yahoo fame, which in essence looks at your JavaScript code and tries to find all of those common bugs and common problems before you even run the code itself. And JavaScript being the dynamic language that it is, it's very easy to create problems without actually realizing it. Misspell an identifier, for example, and bingo, you've declared a new variable. So jslint finds all of those common problems. It has a set of things you can look against. If you want to look at it online, you can actually go to, I think it's jslintcom, and here it is. Basically, you paste your own code in here and click the jslint button, and then the various warnings and errors will come down in this particular box here. Play around with jslint. I use it all the time online. I use it all the time just to check out my own code as I'm writing it. It's a great tool, but what actually is happening with back to jQuery here, the jQuery build process, is it actually has a copy of jslint itself within its tree. If I go over to the build folder here, go into here. Here is the jslint JavaScript file. So it's JavaScript testing JavaScript. And fascinating thing, I didn't realize this was actually here in jQuery until I started researching for this particular webinar. So in essence, by using the jslint JavaScript file in your own build process, you'll be able to check your code for certain common bugs even before you actually run the code. And here's the line you throw into your JavaScript testing of JavaScript. It either returns, I think it either returns true. If it checks out, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. Very good. And it has an errors property that you can read for errors if there are any errors. So that's a kind of cool thing that I didn't actually realize was available, and I'll certainly be playing around with it myself just to see how easy it is to use in my own coding, and you should certainly look at that. So that's essentially all I really want to say about writing a large JavaScript library with a team as regards jQuery. The build or the make file itself, as I said, is just requires something like make or ant. Although it's actually written for a Unix style system, so we have things like shelling out and calling what calls git, calls echo and cat from the system. Sed is a Unix program. So if you've got a Linux or a Mac machine, then downloading jQuery from the Git repository and building your own is very easy. If you're on Windows, like I imagine most of the people on this webinar, then you'll need something like Cygwin to be installed so that you can mimic the Unix commands. So build, have a look at the makefile. If you're in a multi-person team, see what you can take out of it and use for your own use, and see how it goes. Right. So where was I? I was here. So building the final JS file, yes, it's all that concatenation and linting, and part of it is also, I didn't actually make a point of this, the jQuery repository also contains a minifier. It's actually called something bizarre like uglify. It's in here, minifying jQuery. The compiler is called uglify. There we go. So that's the minification process. And again, the if you look in here, it uses this file here to start mangling and replacing long identifiers with short identifiers and putting it all on one line and all that kind of minification stuff that happens. It makes use of a file called parse.js, parse-js.js, which is kind of an interesting file in its own right, actually. It produces a tokenizer and abstract syntax tree of the JavaScript code. Again, something I haven't actually really looked at, but certainly looks fascinating. Anyway, back to now. When we actually use jQuery, we pepper our code with calls to the jQuery function, which is either jQuery itself or this fabulous identifier called $. and then we pass into it something, usually a selector of some description, a CSS selector of some description, and we get something back, something magic. So what do we get back? Is it an array? And we'll have a bit of fun here. So is it an array? What are the elements like? Having a look at .each. In other words, we want to operate on all of the elements of the thing we get back, and we'll talk about chaining and saving as well. So back to some fun stuff here. What I'm going to do is do a little bit of experimentation on my own website. The reason for this is I know what the structure of the website is, and it's a fairly simple structure. So let me just bring up Firebug. We don't really need to look at anything like that. And let me copy some code here. So I don't have to type it. So I just declare some function here called dumpobjch, which basically dumps information about a particular object you're passing in. What I'm going to do first is use this jQuery call to get all of the elements on the page which have a class of post. And then I'm going to dump what I get back. So this call here is a call to jQuery, and I'm going to get something back, and I'm going to say, well, what have I got back? And then I'm going to do something slightly different in that that's a class and this is an ID. So I'm going to do the same with the ID and see what I get back. Now, what actually happens here is, first of all, in my dumpobject function, I check to see, actually I'm using a jQuery function here, I'm going to check to see whether it's an array to begin with. And the answer is no, it's not. In both cases, we have false for is it an array. However, I'm going to print out the length of the object, in other words, the length property of the object passed in, and the first one returns 11, and the second one returns 1. So that sounds like I have 11 elements in my page here, which are a class post, and I have one element, which is correct, whose ID is post underscore 280. And then I say, if the length is greater than 0, get the first element. The issue here is I've already shown it's not an array, and yet here I have some code which looks like it thinks it is an array. And what we get here is this element here, or this item here, and this item here. So the answer to my original question is no, it is not an array as JavaScript understands arrays. However, it does pretend to be an array. Now, the reason for this is probably long-winded, but in essence it's due to the fact that well, let's have a look at the code. So back over to Visual Studio, go to the top, and we go down a little bit. Here we are. Here's the jQuery definition of the jQuery function. It is a function, it takes a selector and a context. In my code over here, all I'm doing is returning, I'm just passing in a selector, I'm not passing in any context. And then what it returns is a new object. So there's the new call. This is the constructor. Didn't want to do that. This is the constructor jQuery.fn.init, and I pass in my original selector. We'll ignore these last two things. So it's going to return a new object, and that's the constructor that we're looking for. So let me just find it. And here we are. So here's my constructor. So we're doing a constructor call. So this object is going to be a brand new object of type, brand new object, but it's going to have a prototype for the init, or rather we're going to start that sentence again. It's going to be a brand new object, and its prototype is going to be the prototype of the init constructor. So before we go anywhere else, let's find the prototype of the init constructor and see what that is. That's going to be init.prototype, and find where it's declared. It's equal to jQuery.fn. jQuery.fn is basically, go up here, because where we are, is the prototype of jQuery itself, and it will include all of these handy functions. It'll have a constructor property, it will have a selector property, it'll have a jQuery property, it'll have a length property, whose default is 0. Size function, a function that converts it to an array. Also points out the fact that the object we get back is not an array, and so on and so forth. And then everything else in jQuery that works on one of these jQuery objects. These methods are added to the prototype, so they'll be available to every single jQuery object that is created through the init constructor. So here we are at init. We have our selector, and then we have lots of code which sets stuff. Kind of interesting thing here is if the, no, not that one. Here we are. If the element is hash something, some ID, then we have a shortcut here where we actually just get that particular element and we set the length property to 1 and set the 0th element, or element 0, or property 0, it doesn't matter in JavaScript, equal to the element we found from the document. So that's why when I go back to here, when I did this ID thing, it had length of 1, and here's the 0th element. So in answer to our questions, it's not an array, but it is very array-like. And that sometimes catches people out, but it is, I like to call it a jQuery collection object. What you get back from calling $something or jQuery something is a jQuery collection. If you call it collection, then you're not worried about it being an array. And then you can start talking about the jQuery collection. So what are the elements of the jQuery collection? Time for a little bit more code, I think. Let's clear that and clear that. Now, let's copy this code over. Right, first of all, I'm going to declare a little helper function called isDomElement. It basically checks to see whether the object passed in has a property called nodeType. DOM elements have a property called nodeType. NodeType of 1 means an actual element. NodeType of 3, I think, is text or something like that. I can't remember. Google is your friend at this point. Anyway, if it has a property called nodeType, then it is a DOM element, essentially. I've updated my dumpobject function so that here's so that I pass in an object. If it has a length property and it's greater than 0, then get the first element log it, check to see whether it's a DOM element or not, and if it is a DOM element, give it, write out its name. Otherwise, it's something else. So we'll see that in a minute. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to find all elements with class post. I'm going to find all, well, just the one element with ID post_280, and then I'm going to do something bizarre. So I have a jQuery collection returned here, and then I'm going to call jQuery with that jQuery collection, and what the heck do I get out of that? We'll see. So run that. So the first one, we say, what are we going to do? The length is greater than 0. Yes, it's 11 or something like that we had before. We're going to have a look at the 0th item, and we're going to log what it is, and it comes out as that. We're going to test to see whether it's a DOM element. It's true. In other words, it does have a node type property. And we're just going to print out the name, and it's a div. So all my post elements are div in this case. In the second bit of code here, we do the same thing. The length is actually 1 in this time. There's only one element. That's the element. It is a DOM element, and again, it's a div. And here, where I take a jQuery collection and I call jQuery on that jQuery collection and see what I get out of it. In fact, it's exactly the same as before. You can call jQuery on a jQuery collection, and all you get back is the same jQuery collection. So that's why these 3 lines here are the same as these 3 lines here. Oops, 3 lines there. So the elements of a jQuery collection are themselves DOM elements, and jQuery does the right thing if you pass in weird stuff. Let's clear that and clear that. Next thing, one of the main methods for a jQuery collection is the each method. So here's some code. And here what I'm doing is I'm calling jQuery to get all my elements with class post, and then I'm going to call each on that particular collection, and the function I'm going to execute for each of those elements is this. But my question is, what type is obj? Index is just the index of the element inside the jQuery collection, so it starts at 0, works its way up to the collection.length -1, and this is the object that is in that particular element. But what type is obj? Well, it doesn't take much to actually work out that it's a DOM element. So if I say dump obj of obj, what we'll get is this. Is a DOM element? Yes, it is. It's a div. It's a DOM element? Yes, it is. So all 11 of them, there we are, all 11 of those, and then down at the bottom, oops, I didn't want to do that. Go back to the console. It just basically, because .each returns the original collection, console log just displays this. So that kind of makes it difficult, really, because I have my object here, and I really want to do something like object.hide or object.show. I want to use jQuery functions on this object. I want to do this, something. I want to be able to manipulate the object as if it were a jQuery collection itself. Well, that's kind of fun because they thought of that, and you can wrap the object inside and basically call the jQuery function with the object, and it will return a jQuery collection where that object is the only item in the collection. Flip over to the code to see that. So I showed you this is where it basically matches the ID. This is code where it matches an HTML element. But if we go a bit further back, we have this bit of code here where we say, okay, does the thing we pass in have a node type property? If it does, then all we need to do is to wrap this selector, in other words, the first parameter, inside a jQuery object. Well, we're in a jQuery object because we're in a constructor, so all we need to do is to set this, in fact, this 0 equal to the item passed in, set the length to 1, and return the object. So it's pretty damn quick to wrap a DOM object inside a jQuery collection. It's right at the top of the constructor call, essentially. In fact, it's the second thing, the second test it does. You don't pass anything in, we just return an empty object. Oh, if it's a DOM element, we can quickly dispose of that particular case, and it returns a collection with one element, which happens to be the element you passed in, DOM element you passed in. So that actually catches people out a lot with each. They don't realize that this object you're getting is a DOM element. They think it's a jQuery object of some description. It's not, but it's very easy to change it into a jQuery collection, and then I can start saying, you know, CSS, background, whatever it happens to be. Actually, I've got a little bit of code here, I think. Yeah. Actually, let's go, before I show you that code, there's something else I want to point out. I kind of glossed over the fact that what the Firebug console is actually showing here is the result of this call. So this creates a collection, then we call each on that collection, and the result of each is actually the collection itself. Let's go back to the code. Oops, wrong key. There we go. Let's go back to the code, to the bottom of each. And, well, find each to begin with. That might help. So here's each. Execute a callback for every element in a match set. So each is a function which accepts a callback. We ignore the args, and all it does is return jQuery.each with this parameter. So in other words, what is being called on. So let's have a look for jQuery.each, and here it is. Takes an object, which is the collection, and the callback there. Does lots of fun stuff, and at the end of it, it returns the original collection. So each returns the original collection. In fact, it turns out that pretty much all jQuery collection methods return the original collection. And this means, in fact, you can chain calls to the collection. So here's the bit of code I was just about to show you. So go back over to Firebug here. We'll just clear this and clear that. So if I have this code, for example, don't know what's going on. Okay, so if I have this code, for example, so what I do in this code is call jQuery to find all elements of class post, then dot call hide on that with the slow parameter, and then from the return of that I'm going to call each, and I'm going to change the background color to teal, nice and nasty, and then I'm going to show it all. So if I just move this down a bit, and then I call this, you can see it happening. So it slides away, comes back, and the background is teal. Very nice and nasty. So if I go back to the code again, and I find hide, for example, and if I look at hide, here we are, go down to the bottom, it returns this. In other words, the object it was called on. In other words, the original collection. And I think show is, or maybe it's not. Yeah, show is just above. If I go down to the bottom of show, I return the collection. So the fact is that all of jQuery collection methods return the original collection it was called on. So you can do this fun chaining of methods in jQuery. You don't have to write code like this, for example. So hide, and then each, and then you don't have to write this kind of code because, as I say, the return value of a method call on the jQuery collection is that jQuery collection itself. In fact, now we've got that code, there is something else to note. A lot of people I see, say on Stack Overflow or wherever, write code something like this. So how about they have some, they can do some processing on the code, sorry, processing on the DOM. So basically they, do something like hide all the elements, do some bunch of code, and then they show all the elements. Now, as that will work, but imagine what is actually going on inside this call. In fact, what happens is there is no shortcut. We have to interrogate the DOM for all of the elements with that particular class name. So there's an awful lot of code that's going to be executed to do this. And what a lot of people don't actually realize is they could do something like this. So so posts, I declare a variable called posts, and then I say posts.hide, whoops, a bunch of other code, and then posts.show. And this saving of a jQuery collection is perfectly fine, providing obviously you're not going to be, in my case, adding a bunch more divs of class post, in which case you might have to reinterrogate the DOM to get them all. But it's perfectly fine code. You know, jQuery is just a function. It's going to return an object of some description, so save the object and then apply the methods of the object, rather than, generate the object and apply the method, generate the object and apply the methods, and so on and so forth. So be aware of that kind of ease of use of a jQuery collection. You don't have to, go and call it immediately again. Naughty, I didn't put a semicolon. So in fact this code will actually just run right now. It doesn't actually do very much apart from show and hide. There we go. You saw it in the background there. Okay. So we saw it's not an array. It does look like one. It has a length property and it has, indexed elements. It's just an ordinary object. We'll call it a collection. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. The elements are DOM elements, but you can wrap them with with jQuery itself. We showed .each, in fact, where you needed that wrapping, so you could access the jQuery functionality. We saw chaining, and how chaining works is because the methods actually return the original collection. And then we saw a bit about saving. And that was it. So that's it for today. As I said, in a couple of weeks' time, on the 6th of June, same time, same channel, I'll be talking about the basic use of jQuery. So we'll look into more about, what you can pass into the jQuery function, what you get out of it, and the various fun methods that you have at your disposal, so you can activate and animate your page. So without further ado, let's have a quick look and see if there are any questions. If you have any questions about what I presented, please do ask them. We have another 10 minutes or so. So I can't see any questions at the moment. So while you're all thinking about it, or maybe you don't have any questions at the moment, I will be creating a blog post on CTODX which covers the same material as what you've just seen. So that will be available either later on today or early tomorrow. And once Jeff, our video guy, renders this complete webinar, it'll be available on our DevExpress channel, which is tv.devexpress.com. That again will be either later today or early tomorrow morning. Just as a brief advertorial, we have a fairly full week of webinars this week. It's Memorial Day next weekend, so it's Memorial Weekend. So we're packing in a bunch of webinars before Memorial Day. So today's was me on JavaScript. Tomorrow we have 2 webinars at 10 Pacific time. We have Ask the DevExpress XPF team, and Emil Mesropian will be talking to you and will be asking questions from you, so that the team of our Silverlight and WPF products can answer them for you. So that's tomorrow at 10 Pacific. Tomorrow at noon Pacific, we have Advanced CodeRush plugins and custom painting. Mark Miller and Rory Becker will show how to paint on the Visual Studio Editor surface. This is absolutely fascinating, so even if you're not ready to write any CodeRush plugins, do please watch this. It's just great fun messing around with Visual Studio. On Wednesday at 10 Pacific, we have a Ask the DevExpress reporting team. So it's your chance to ask questions of the reporting team. Seth Juarez will be moderating that particular talk. On the 26th, which is Thursday, we have a preview of what's coming up for WPF and Silverlight. Emil will be back again 2 days later to talk about what's coming up in version 2011.1. Oh, by the way, the beta is out. If you haven't received the email, go to Client Services and download the beta and play around and have fun. Anyway, on Thursday, Emil will be looking at what's new and demonstrating what's new. That's at 10 Pacific again. And on Friday, we're going to have a bit of fun. We're going to be looking at how to deploy XAF, our Express App Framework, on Azure. And that's with Tolis. And we're going to be looking at how to configure XAF for Azure and using XAF on Azure. What are we going to look at there? Deployment prerequisites, modification of the XCRM source code. I hope you all know what this means. Creating an Azure deployment package and exploring the Azure portal. It's going to be kind of fun. That's on Friday at 10 Pacific again. Well, I don't have any questions, and my voice is going hoarse. So thanks everybody for joining in, and hope it was informative, and I'll see you next time in 2 weeks. So take care.